Hey guys, Ridiculous Badger coming at you from Planet 880, and this is a cool thing that we're doing. It's called University of War. This is the 5th episode. Welcome to it. We have been talking about how to gear out commanders. Have you ever noticed that when you talk to some of your guildmates about how to gear out a specific comm, whoop, the crash, that sometimes your guildmates seem to know exactly what to put on that commander, whether or not they've used them. So we are talking about how to learn to do that for yourself in this series. This is the 5th episode. We are going to be covering gem types today, and it is going to be the last episode in this chapter of University of War. Next chapter will probably delve more into commander roles. We'll discuss a little bit about commander roles, though, today. So, what determines the use that you have for a commander, what you use a commander for, is role. We talked about the fact that first on, when we took a look at it, the very first episode, we said the thing that you got to do is really you got to look at their skills and find out what kind of role that commander is looking to serve, or what kind of role that they have aptitude to serve. So, that's true. Other things that determine that role that you deploy a commander for are going to be, besides the skills, it's going to be the equipment that you use. It's going to be also the gem types that you utilize. You've probably heard before that many people look at Stella and call her a glass cannon, but also many people look at Stella and call her a tank. How could both of those things be true? And that's something that we will look at a little bit more in our next chapter of University of War. But suffice it to say, what is deciding the difference there between Stella being a tank or Stella being a glass cannon is a combination of the skills, the equipment that you use, and also the gem types that you put on her. So, when deploying a commander and deciding what you are gearing them out towards, you look at the skills. Like, for example, we look at Nico. We see that Nico's skills actually point him towards being an attack commander. And because he's infantry, we call infantry attack commanders glass cannons. And that's something we'll start to look at what those different role types and what they're called on our next chapter. But when you look at him and notice that he's a glass cannon, so you begin to build him out then with attack gear, as we know, devastation helmet, titans, and then your legs and your chest in general are utility. But assuming that we're not going for T12 plus builds, you're going to try and get some attack or some crit damage on your legs. We talked about this, and we talked about how the chest, really is just kind of a utility slot for you. It decides what other stats that you need, and then you could just kind of go for it, and how you could inlay gems on these pieces of equipment to support the role that you're deploying him for. So, what about gem types, right? We talked about gem stats. So all gem types are gem types, I'm getting tripped up. I apologize for that. Gem types bring two things to the party, right? They bring a 2-set or a 3-set bonus and a 4-set or a 5-set bonus. This used to be much easier to talk about before we had constellation gems, but let's look at our gems. So the lower rank or the regular Star Jewels, they provide a 2-set bonus and they provide a 4-set bonus, right? A 2-set bonus and a 4-set bonus. A 2-set bonus and a 4-set bonus. When we talk about constellation gems, they provide a 3-set bonus and a 5-set bonus, right? Okay? So all these weird crystally things, imagine when I'm talking about 2-set and a 4-set, for those you're talking about a 3-set and a 5-set. And that's easy to understand. So when we go and we look at, say, Sagittarius, and let's take a look at what are these 2-set bonuses. So these 2-set bonuses are stats, right? Look, for Sagittarius, if you put 2 Sagittarius gems on your commander, he's going to have plus 30% total crit damage. Great. Taurus, 2-set. Additional resistance weaken effect, plus 30%. Great. Scorpio, plus 30% HP. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, these are just like sticking an extra gem on someone or having a better piece of equipment. These are not things to overlook. However, they generally do not set what kind of star jewel you're going to use. At least, not for beginners. For beginners, in general, beginners are looking at the 4-set bonuses. And the 4-set bonuses are applied to your gear set, to your comm, and it just basically turns into an extra 20% trigger rate skill. So just like for Nico, Sniper determines the fact that he's an attack comm. If you were to put a 4-set star jewel on Nico, you would want to look for a 4-set star jewel that maximizes his capability to do damage. And then as a corollary, we will look at 2-set gem sets. We will look at gem sets that in their 2-set capability in their 2-set bonus, they also give the capability to deal extra damage. So if we could get those two things to align, the 4-set bonus or the star jewel skill to align also with the 2-set bonus, to align also with the role that we want to deploy the commander for, or the story that the commander is trying to tell, then you have what is called in the biz absolute synergy. Look, I mean, in general, it's going to be your 4-set bonus that determines what you use Star Jewels for. There are some builds out there. I do not want to diminish the fact that there are builds out there that take advantage of 2-set bonuses, and maybe even the 2-set bonus on some builds are more important than the 4-set bonuses, and sometimes people will stack more 2-set bonuses. That is a possibility, although it's slightly less utilized. And then there is also there are also builds that make me lose my train of thought. There are also, and of course, with Geist Stones being more prevalent out there and Soul Stones being more prevalent out there, you will find people who, say, have the capability to run 2 4-sets and a 2-set, or a 4-set and a 2-set. And, that's just gravy, and that just serves to enhance the other things that you have going on in that commander. And you might say, well, that's very well, Badger, and thank you for that wonderful explanation. but there are so many freaking Star Jewels, and you're right, user, there are. So let's talk about the buckets of Star Jewels. Like, there are these buckets and we're throwing jewels in them. That wouldn't happen. There's no jewel buckets. Okay, so Star Jewels fall into 4 categories by and large. There are sure hit jewels. These are jewels like your Sagittarius and your Gemini that you could see in the 4-set. Received power set, blah, blah, blah. 20% chance to trigger before next action. This time attack will hit. And then this also has ignored target 60% HP buff. Fine, but the operant thing is that this will hit. So that's important, and that is the first classification, just like here, Gemini, 20% chance to trigger. There's an additional action this turn, and all common and extra hit attack will hit. So this does 2 sure hits. It's just a regular attack, but it's nice. So the first bucket is sure hit skills. Sometimes you've got a comm that needs extra capability to hit because they don't really have a sure hit skill on one of their other skills. Or that they don't have enough accuracy, then you'll want to start stacking sure hit skills from gems. It's worthy to note, however, that most of the time when we start to look at sure hit skills that determine a commander's role, we're generally looking for skills that have a higher chance to trigger than 20%. However, when you begin to stack multiple sure hit skills on top of each other, it gives a greater chance to trigger at least one sure hit skill. And so, in general, when you start looking towards sure hit skills from Star Jewels, in general, you're going to be looking at adding more than one in there. So you might do a Gemini, and then you might do a Taurus or Sagittarius on top of that. If the commander already if the commander already sure hits very, very well, or if the commander is very, very accurate, like, say, King or Medusa, then you wouldn't need to stack sure hit gems, and then you could start to look at some of the other categories of Star Jewels. The second category of Star Jewels is going to be buffs. Buffs. Where's a buff? Where's a buff? No, this isn't a buff. Here we go. So, Cancer, 20% chance, blah, blah, blah. All of our troops' defense increases by 100%. That does not provide any additional capability for you to damage the enemy. This might be something that is good for a tank commander or a commander that needs some more survivability. So that's going to be your buff category. Then there's your debuff category. So we got sure hits. Sure hits are great if you want to deal additional damage or if you need more accuracy. We have buffs. Buffs in general will buffs are going to increase your survivability, or they're going to allow you to do more damage or things like that. In general, you can't build a commander around just buffs. There has to be some other capability, either in survivability or in trigger rate of sure hit skills to provide in order to receive fully the benefit of the buff. Then there are your debuffs. Debuffs are basically the aggressive version of buffs. Instead of making yourself stronger, they make the enemy weaker, and you generally use that in a disable class role, or you would use that in some kind of a skirmisher class, a middle-of-the-road class, and in some cases a tank class to give you some more capability to actually hit the enemy, because generally tank classes happen to not have a ton of accuracy. So this could stack the deck in their favor. Andromeda also brings us to the fourth category, which are the indirect category. This is all the stuff that doesn't fit into the sure hit skill bucket, the buff bucket, the debuff bucket, fits into the indirect bucket. So Andromeda and many gems happen to actually have more than one. They fit in more than one bucket. So one of those buckets is debuff, in that it decreases the dodge of the enemy by 100% each time it procs. The other thing is that the target skips their next action. That's not a buff, it's not a debuff, it's not doing damage to the enemy, but it does mess with the enemy. So I call that an indirect. Many gem sets do multiple, or fit in multiple buckets, right? So like, everybody talks about sniper, breakdown, non-violent resistance. Those are huge skills that in many cases determine the deployment of commanders on the battlefield and determine the meta. But also, there have been gem sets that have been doing the same thing for a while. Like, not that one. Here we go. Like, for example, Leo. 20% chance to trigger before the action. This attack will hit, so that's a sure hit. It fits into the first bucket. That means you can use this on a commander that is an aggressive commander, an offensive commander, or maybe they just need some more accuracy. And disregard target 60% defense buffs. So it also fits into the third bucket, which is the debuff bucket. Sometimes gems that their 4-set skill make them fit into multiple buckets. Sometimes those end up doing more damage than gems that are just simple, like, just fit in one bucket. Like, Gemini, for example, does 2 sure hits. Let's look at Gemini. Gemini, for example, does 2 sure hits. Each one, it does just a regular amount of damage on those sure hits that you would do if your regular normal attack damage hit on your turn. And that's great, but sometimes the Leo gem, Capricorn, you idiot. Sometimes the Leo gem with its single hit, but its 60% debuff to defense will actually do more damage. So this becomes something that not only do you have to look at what the role is for the commander that you are using, but you have to also look at who you think you will be facing. So in the case of basically easy comms, like I know for the majority of this series, I think what my go-to has been attack comms. And in the case of attack comms, usually what you end up doing is you stack sure hit skills. So Gemini is a universal gem, and Gemini and Libra are great because they are universal gems, and you can kind of use them on a lot, and they have a lot of utility. So Gemini is a great gem to use for sure hits for, say, Nico in infantry, and so is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a sure hit. It provides total crit damage bonus, right? So this is where we have the 4 set, the sure hit 4 set, aligns with the bonus on the 2 set. Both of them are aggressive, and they allow you to deal more damage. And that also aligns with an attack roll or glass cannon focus on the commander of using, say, Nikojiro. So that is where you get total synergy. And especially the fact that here it has a debuff, this could allow you to do more damage if the opponent has a significant amount of HP buff on them. So it becomes something that you need to. It's not an easy thing. It's not something like, a lot of people will say, like, I'll just take the original example that I started with at the beginning of this video, or the previous one if that one went down, or whatever. I can't really follow anymore. But if you take Stella and you plop her into guild chat and go, hey, how do I build out Stella? Well, then some people will tell you a build, straight up. The smart people will ask you what you are using her for. So they're inquiring, what is the role that you are using Stella for? Because if you start to look at, where she's right here. If you start to look at Stella's skills, it's not super duper clear what her role is. In that, like, hey, look at Dizzy, for example. Enemy accuracy and attack is decreased, so she has a debuff. Wings of Eternity, after this the activator's troops have an additional action. The fact that she has an additional action, yes, it gives her an additional attack, but it also gives her a chance to trigger all of her other skills and all of her gem skills. And based on that, Stella is actually a multi-role commander. She's not a glass cannon, like, by design. You don't have to use her that way. Nico is a glass cannon. His decent skill is a skill that debuffs the enemy and is a sure hit skill, so it cuts through the enemy defense and it cuts through the enemy HP. The more attack, the more you lean into that sniper skill trigger, the better Nico will perform to plan. But the fact is, with Stella, there's no stat that you could build into for Wings of Eternity that amplifies the use of Wings of Eternity. Wings of Eternity is not there for doing damage. It is there for giving you additional skill and gem procs. So if somebody places Stella into your guild chat and says, how do I build out Stella? The smart people will say, well, what are you going to use her for? And yes, you can build her as a glass cannon. You can also build her as a disable class. You can build her even at the very high levels with old T12 with Transcenders. You could build her as a tank. And in those cases, it's not exactly clear what gem sets you should use. So if you just go into your guild chat and go gem sets for Stella, again, a smart person is going to say, what are you using her for? If you are turning her into a glass cannon, then you will want to prioritize the usage of the first bucket of gem sets, right? You will want to get Gemini on her. What was that? What was that? That was red. Oh, that was that. Whatever. That was red. That was irksome. Now I gotta check my shield. So if you are using her as a glass cannon, you will want to prioritize usage of the first bucket of gems. You will want to get Gemini on her. You will want to get Sagittarius on her. If you're using her as advanced tier, if it's T9, you might even want to consider Scorpio on her, if it's T9 or T10. If it's T11, you might want to start considering Taurus on her. You might want to consider Leo on her. These are all various options. If you're using her as a tanky class, then you will want to lean more into buffs and indirect and some debuffs. You'll want to look at Andromeda. You will want to look at even Aries is an option. Virgo is an option. The most important thing when it comes to gems is to remember that, like everything else on your commander, what determines the best usage of your commander is not the name of your commander. It is the skills that they have, it is the gear that you put on them, and it is the choice of gem sets. I want to thank everybody for joining me here today, even through the technical difficulties. If you have any questions, as always, please send them to me. Send them to me online, or you could hit me up on Discord, or you can put them in the comments section, and I will aim to have future episodes of University of War, and I will aim to answer your questions. Next chapter of University of War, we will be handling commander roles and like really doing a deep dive. So we'll look at your glass cannons, we'll look at your dodge killers, we'll look at your tanks, we'll look at disable class, and really start to break down what types of gear are your options for those, what gems are your options, and maybe we could even get into some formations. I don't think I'm going to be having that exactly next week. I need to figure out how I'm going to do that. But definitely look where I post these, where I do post these announcements. I will be posting an announcement when I'm ready to start up again with Chapter 2 of University of War, which is going to be about what's your role. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the event.